But this is going to be implemented on military bases over the next decade plus. And so let's hear from some folks who are actually working on those bases. I'd like to turn it to my colleague, Tom Calvert-Rosenberger, who runs a program that we run called the Military Energy Resilience Catalyst. It's a program really dedicated to working with installation energy managers all across the country and across the military services. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Tom.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Really appreciate that, and welcome to everyone on the call, and particularly to our panelists, Matt, Sabrina, and Shannon. I could not be more excited to highlight you and your work today. So before we get into it here, just want to give a little level setting note that this installation focused panel will be more based on the problems we see from the ground up. So each of our panelists here today are going to touch these projects, and they are installation energy resilience practitioners that work on a variety of different projects, not just vehicle electrification and EVSE on their bases. So I want to give you their perspective and really let that shine through here in the next 25 minutes or so. As Mike mentioned, I'm a senior associate at Converge. One of my primary responsibilities is running our Military Energy Resilience Catalyst, MERC cohort. And really the cohort is the focus of the entire program. What we do on a day-to-day basis is provide programming and resources and all sorts of development tools to accelerate the connections that our cohort members can make with DoD headquarters and policymakers, as well as technology experts, to accelerate the pace at which energy resilience projects are completed on installations. So Matt, Sabrina, and Shannon have all been members of our MERC cohorts, either in 2019 or 2020, and is how I know all the folks here today. A quick note, just a reminder, please do use the Q&A function. If we have time as we slide into the last few minutes of this panel, I will be looking through the Q&A and try to pull out any questions that I see sourced from the audience there. In the interest of time, we're going to run this just slightly differently than the last panel. I'm going to give introductions for Matt, Sabrina, and Shannon. If you all will just wave as I give your introduction, then we'll do just a quick lightning round question, 30 seconds to a minute, to kind of explore the breadth of what is in your area of responsibility in your day job. And then we'll get into more specific questions from each of you. So here we go. Matt Freeman, everyone, the energy manager at FE Warren Air Force Base, and has been working there for 4 years in that capacity. Matt has a background in civil engineering. He's been in construction for many, many years. And that's kind of the experience that he brings in as a certified energy manager at FE Warren. FE Warren Air Force Base, if you were not familiar, is the oldest continuously operating installation within the US Air Force. And so it presents a number of energy resilience challenges, as you can imagine, if you're thinking about some of those installation problems that Mike alluded to earlier. So Matt, super, super pleased you're here.
Glad to be here, thanks.
Yeah. Next is Shannon Bergt. Shannon, we work very closely with as well, has more than 15 years of experience in energy, and 10 of which have been on military installations. She's been the energy manager at Selfridge Air National Guard Base, but is now, and for the last 5 years, has been the installation energy manager at Detroit Arsenal. She works closely with the Ground Vehicle Systems Center to optimize opportunities between the operational energy and installation energy project space. And if you do a quick Google of Shannon Bergt, Shannon most recently won, I want to make sure I get this right, the 2020 Secretary of the Army Energy and Water Management Award. Do that Google, she's famous, everybody. Shannon Bergt. Last, certainly not least, Sabrina Hopkins. Sabrina was a member of our most recent MERC cohort. She is the current installation energy manager on board at Naval Air Station, Pensacola. She's also a certified energy manager and won another award, 2019 Federal Energy Management Program Fed Spotlight. Like Shannon is a native of Detroit, Sabrina is a native of Pensacola. And having just been to Pensacola for a workshop ourselves, I got to tell you, you meet very few people who are as big of fans of their installation as Sabrina is. So Sabrina attends the Blue Angels homecoming every year. And if you ever get a chance to go down to Pensacola, it is a real vibe, the Blue Angels vibe. So Sabrina, super glad to have you with us. Very quickly, just to explore kind of what all of these folks are working on and what they deal with day to day in their purview, I've got just a quick question. It's the same one for everybody. Let's just go for like 30 seconds, a minute on this, and then we'll jump into vehicle electrification and EVSE more specifically. But just to get us started, Matt, we'll start with you first. What has been the most exciting critical infrastructure upgrade that you have seen during your time at F.E. Warren Air Force Base?
So it's not so much what I've seen yet but what I'm hoping to see, because we're working a microgrid project where we're looking to get geothermal as a supply for our electrical needs. And the driving proponent of that is that we can't relocate our mission here. So I have a real requirement to supply long-term energy.
Looking for some geothermal because you're stuck. I love it. Thanks, Matt. Shannon, we'll just stay in the same order here. What about what's going on at Detroit Arsenal? What's been some exciting upgrades that you've seen?
So currently, right now, we're in the process of a Milcon substation and electrical distribution project. We were lucky enough last September to get a UFR for a Milcon duct bank. And so that's allowing us a lot of opportunity space to break down some of the barriers we're seeing in the operational and installation energy realm. And also we're working on some pretty exciting new things related to hydrogen.
Just gonna leave it on that cliffhanger. Thanks, Shannon. I appreciate that. And Sabrina, over to you. What about what's going on at Naval Air Station in Pensacola?
So at Naval Air Station Pensacola, our main infrastructure we've been doing has been applying multiple UESC contracts to our various buildings. Pensacola have over 800 facilities, 3 different areas kind of stretched out wide. So we have to apply very energy measures to pretty much get our base reduction down like we need it. So far from our recent UESC, we was able to reduce our reduction by 10% in our consumption, which makes a significant savings across our entire installation.
Yeah, and so Sabrina, actually, we'll just kind of stick with that thread for a moment. You know, something that was enlightening to me when we went down to Naval Air Station Pensacola was kind of the deep history there of successful UESCs and using the savings from energy efficiency upgrades for other energy projects or energy resilience projects at times. So just want to kick us off here. What in your mind do you see as kind of the greatest challenges to perhaps doing more UESCs and then using that funding for electric vehicle support equipment in any capacity?
Yeah, so in doing a UESC project, pretty much I can talk on our recent one where we made an attempt to address the electrical infrastructure and applying EV charging stations. Unfortunately, it's always have that resiliency piece, and resilience, they really kind of don't pay for itself, as when you have a full wide UESC project where you can apply the HVAC, you can apply or replace some lighting. So the savings to investment ratio always pans out. So in this case, we already had leadership buy-in, and sometimes that can be the more strain that you can do. The leadership was all the way buy-in on this one. But once we calculated the saving to investment ratio, we need additional buy-in. So with that being said, we just looked at it, not really pushing it to the side at this current moment, but until we get like a mass fleet, which is coming, we're gonna really have to build up our electrical infrastructure into that process. And that's the only thing, because when you're doing a UESC project, your hands are kind of tied and making sure you stay within the threshold of your saving to investment ratio, but you're just looking at a building. But when you're looking at electrical infrastructure, you're digging more deep into your grid, more deep into what's the benefit of the installation. And as you know, you just down there, Tom, we have a lot of land where we can do upgrades all over the installation. But another challenge I have ran into would be a glint and glare study. NAS Pensacola is a training facility with a lot of training space all around. So you have to address that as well. So we have discovered that we do need additional more buy-in to come to meet our various needs, which is more funding constraints that is kind of much out of our needs right now.
Yeah, that was something I noticed, Sabrina. It was certainly a lot of opportunity, but as you mentioned, and as Mr. Tucker mentioned on our first panel, it's always a mission first, right? And there's always some component of resilience when we're talking about these energy projects. And so I want to tie that back to you, Matt, mentioning, you've got missions that can't go anywhere, and so you're in a little bit of a special or unique predicament, I think. And so really, what does it look like for full fleet electrification at F.E. Warren Air Force Base?
So yeah, we are working a pilot program, but only from a privately owned vehicle point of view. My privatized utility contractor has requested that we look into that, but I had to wave them off on the government side now because we have some real limiting factors where I am. I work in the nuclear enterprise, so some of the stuff that we deal with, of course, is all controlled, unclassified information. So I'm going to stay real high level. We deal with almost 10,000 square miles of real estate. One of my farthest sites is approximately 150 miles one way. We have 165 total sites, geographically separated units. Of those, there's probably 60 of those are greater than 100 miles away. So I realized that in 2020, we just broke some barriers as far as the median range of electric vehicles getting to the 250 mark, which is great. But you can see that I have a lot of stuff that's outside that threshold. So there would need to be a lot of infrastructure in order to support the vehicles that go out into the missile field. The second limiting factor I have is it has to do with harmonics and frequencies. Anything electric has to go through a hardening process. We don't own that process. That process is owned by Hill Air Force Base. And basically anything that comes in contact has to be assessed and determined through some MIL standards the standards are there, but it takes time to assess these things. And so upwards of a year to get something evaluated and then approved to be used. And so that's where a lot of the electronics of the electric vehicles would need to be determined through that process. And so for us, that's a huge limiting factor. My LRS people were extremely gracious in explaining a lot of this to me. And so I'm glad to be here and pass some of these things along to you guys.
That's awesome. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, so what I'm hearing is range and then hardening equipment. Yeah. So that's very interesting and leads me over to Shannon, actually, and this is perfect. Shannon, you sit in the middle of the home of the American auto industry, which is pretty crazy, and a place where a lot of these concerns that Matt is talking about will be addressed, at least on the industry side. So thinking about, your local collaboration opportunities with the auto industry, I guess what's there to make EVSE and vehicle electrification ubiquitous around Detroit Arsenal?
So due to our proximity to the big three, the fact that we're located directly next door to the GM Tech Center, and one of our biggest tenants is the Ground Vehicle Systems Center, we've included bidirectional integration of not only electric, but also hydrogen fuel cell, tactical and fleet vehicles in our microgrid concept that I mentioned earlier. So one of the other things we're working on as part of a planned utility energy services contract with our natural gas provider We're looking at ways at how the vehicle to grid integration can work, not just on the DoD end, but how the work that we're doing can work with our industry and utility partners for opportunities to work through emerging issues in a more collaborative environment. So we're looking at, how those partnerships with not only the big three, but our utilities can come into play for us. A few years ago, I attended a session at the North American Cybersecurity Summit in Detroit that addressed vehicle cybersecurity threats. As the person who holds the ATO for my meter system, for my current building automation system, for my future microgrid system, I was really happy to hear some of the panel discuss ATOs and who was going to hold that. I can tell you, due in large part to a lot of what I saw and heard at that North American Cybersecurity Summit, I was very adamant that in our planning process right now that we include cybersecurity as an integrated part of what we're doing, not just infrastructure improvement. And so I think right now, our proximity to the big three and our work with the utility companies really gives us an opportunity space to work through some of what that looks like. A lot of, my concerns are we can plug in a tactical vehicle. That's something that we've always talked about. We have control over the MIL standard for that. But what does the attack surface look like now that you start plugging in POVs, right? And so if we're looking at bidirectional control, we're looking at tactical vehicles as both a load and a source of power on the installations for our energy resilience. What happens when we start plugging in POVs? What kind of threat vector do we introduce into the grid once we start doing that? So one of the things I think would be important for us to see is DoD and utility leaders to be proactive in working with industry to address not only the infrastructure deficiencies that we're seeing, but cybersecurity risks in a cohesive approach. As the person who works through the building automation systems, a lot of what we're seeing aren't always cohesive. It's kind of an afterthought. It needs to be part of the entire conversation. And I do believe that our proximity to the big three and some of the collaboration we've been doing with our utility partners is going to be, beneficial to folks moving forward.
That's awesome. Thank you, Shannon. And so really in summation here, we've got cybersecurity challenges, range, hardening issues, and then contracting issues with pulling energy savings into this as well. So there are any number of challenges that still remain, and I think it's pretty clear that we see those from the installation level. I'm being told I have 3 minutes left, so just quick question to all of you, I guess. What is exciting when you think about vehicle electrification on your installations in the next 5 years, the next decade? Where do you look for areas of opportunity?
Okay, so now that unmute works, I would say that I'm very excited about the work that we're doing, not only on electric, but hydrogen vehicles, and that the work that we're doing to break down the barrier between both operational and installation energy and what that can look like moving forward. So those bidirectional opportunities that we can see with our fleet vehicles, so that we're looking at things not only as liability, but we look at the opportunity space with a lot of what we have in our fleet for assets and the work that we're going to be doing moving forward for, infrastructure improvements and cybersecurity.
Thanks,
Same
Shannon.
here. I kind of go along with Shannon on that one. It's the same. Just looking forward to more electrical infrastructure on NES Pensacola to bring back the ability to have a lot of more fleet of electric vehicles to come forward, because we do have a lot of POVs as well as a lot of government vehicles on our way. So just build it up where it needs to be and apply everything, of course, as far as for energy security.
That's great. That's great. Matt, any last thoughts to add?
I just think that there's a huge potential for diversity and integration of that diversity. And just another shout out to you guys. Bringing this stuff together in these kinds of formats is just a great job. So thanks to Merck and the whole team.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Matt. I couldn't agree with you more about bringing these conversations together, making time for them in our days.